Okay, so there you have the title of my talk. So all I'm talking about is some travels in the state of New Mexico for looking at the sky visually. And so I decided years ago that visually looking at the natural dark starry sky was one component of amateur astronomy that I really live for. So that's all I mentioned to Paul this might be one possible talk subject. He said sure, try it. So let's see if we can try the right button. So just to back up, I threw in a couple of astrophotos, but it's really useless because you can pick out Orion there and some other constellations, but they don't do justice. In fact, no photographs I've seen anywhere do any justice at all to the actual real sight of a starry, unpolluted night sky, just brilliant with stars and Milky Way. So that's really my theme that I'll be trying to describe visually, since I can't really do it photographically. So the only images I've seen that come anywhere near approaching it are artists' conceptions. So I just have a few photographs just to decorate an otherwise blank screen, but I sure didn't come here to show off any photographs. So here's an outline of what I'll be doing for the past 10 years. Had a first visit and then had a last visit last year, and in between, I'll mention a few little details. So that's all I've tried to put together for a few minutes here. And so just for orientation, where is the state of New Mexico? Well, that's west of Texas. I guess we have a pointer here somewhere. State of Texas. So it's west of Texas. It's east of Arizona, south of Colorado, and it's north of Old Mexico. So a couple of spots that I'll point out. You may have heard of this already. You may have heard Arnold mentioned the White Sands Missile Range, where an unexpected capsule came down there recently. And first spot I'll be talking about will be just east of Alamogordo. And so it's one of the towns sort of in New Mexico. There are two major cities, if you call it major, Albuquerque and Santa Fe. And if you want to go to where spots I've been going, you'd start off at El Paso, Texas, which is right here. So just for a bit of orientation. But I have a couple of other charts. The other 2 points I'll be talking about will be Silver City and the spot up here called Cosmic Campground. So that's just some orientation. And you may have heard of some other spots. You may have heard of Roswell, New Mexico, and Route 66 across the north part of the state. But anyway, a beautiful state, in my opinion, to visit. And so I've been visiting it for the past 10 years. So here's the reason. So you may have seen these light pollution maps that have become publicized in the past few years. And no real color scale, but the arrow marks off the part of southern New Mexico state where I've been going. And so one spot that I'll mention is was called New Mexico Skies. And so it's a company that's right about here, approximately, up in the mountains north and east of Alamogordo. And the spot where I've been going is here, and a place called Cosmic Campground that I'll point out is up in the northern part of it here. There's a few other spots in western USA that are accessible and pretty dark. I've been to some spots in southern state of Utah and a few others. Some spots are not really easily accessible. You know, I see the Rocky Mountains down here and some forest area and so on. But this spot is, I've decided it's a really nice spot to visit, and I'll try to communicate to you why. So you have a bigger chart here, and I think I mentioned New Mexico Skies is just past this town called Cloudcroft, which is on crest of the mountains and then near Mayhill. And then other spots will be further to the west. But let's just have a quick look at this spot called New Mexico Skies. I should ask, anybody heard of New Mexico Skies? If you have, good, I can hear you, but I can't see you because of lights in my eyes. But this is an image from approximately 10 years ago when they were promoting amateur astronomers to come and visit their location because they had cabins for rent. So you could go, it was basically a bed and breakfast for amateur astronomers. That's what they were promoting. So this is an old image. It's about 10 years old or more, just illustrating the reason why I went the first time. So I went for a few years. And so just a few more images of what's going on here. I mentioned that they were inviting people to come and stay at their accommodations for several nights and use the telescopes or bring their own. Here's the cabin where I stayed at the first few years, and tiny little cabin, and I think it was a one-bedroom thing and had a kitchen and a bathroom and so on, but good little spot here to set up a telescope on the driveway, or else they had another area where you could set up a telescope and leave it for a few days if you wanted to, with electrical supply. So that's the cabin I stayed at, and here's another part of their property as it was about 10 years ago when I took these pictures. So you see numerous observatories that were all in use for various groups or people around the world somewhere that operated them remotely. They're also for their own use and for their own guests that would come. So they wanted guests to come and rent their telescope. So I did once. I rented their, I think it was 6-inch binoculars I used one time when I was there. But they had various buildings, platforms for observatories, huge observatory here, a roll-off roof shed, roll-off roof that would uncover quite a number of telescopes inside, and they're building more, and so more are being built, not here, but here you see more under construction, and this was about 10 years ago. So I went for a few years and then I stopped going there because they stopped the business of making it available for guests to come and stay as a bed and breakfast sort of thing. And that's because they converted over to access for remote observatory use. So all of those facilities you saw are now being promoted for the big business of remote observatories. So people no longer stay there. They no longer want people to come and stay there. Their new business model became providing access to astronomers anywhere in the world that want to set up the telescope or access them. So it's quite busy that way. So that's fine, except I used to like going there. Okay, so a few years after that, a few scenery images. So I didn't come here to talk about scenery, but point out a few little details here. And one is the blue skies. You know, there's quite a lot of blue skies in the few images I put in here. The other thing is this was about 10 years ago. You see full cutoff lighting, and so now in the past maybe 5 years, it's become fairly popular for a lot of towns and cities to install full cutoff lighting, especially with the invention of LED lighting for street lighting. So they've, except in Toronto, of course, they've cut out Cobra headlights and the incandescent high sodium lamps that are in use in Toronto. So the point here is that long time ago, Arizona and New Mexico had dark skies because of good lighting along the highway here. So that's the purpose of this illustration. I mentioned a lot of scenery and a lot of blue skies in the images that you see here. I should mention one other reason that drew me to the place is another detail that I really like is walking in the mountains. So I didn't come here to talk about hiking. I just thought I should mention one little detail here. You see some blue sky in the picture to the left. One of the hiking trails was I put in this picture on the right. It's not always, every time I go there in winter, it's not always clear blue sky. It can be blizzard. So got to be prepared for that. In fact, when I was there a year ago, they had a deep freeze, and so had some few centimeters or several inches of, as they call it, of snow on the ground in a spot that otherwise doesn't get snow very often. And it was a deep freeze, and one morning the temperature was around approximately -12, -15 Celsius. It was a morning when I had been out at a location I'll be showing you. So -15, no problem. So go there prepared with coat and winter gear and so on. So standing outside for a few hours, you'd be prepared for that, and that's fine with me. But for those people there, it was quite a deep freeze, and the motel where I stayed at had frozen pipes. All the plumbers in town were busy scrambling, trying to refix all the broken pipes in all the motels in town. So it was quite a unusually deep freeze about a year ago there. One other detail I could mention here is because today is one particular day. It's called today. Anybody here want to say what today's connection is with mental health? So it's it's Bell. What was the word again? Bell. Bell Let's Talk Day. Coincidentally, today's Bell Let's Talk Day. So the idea of that is to promote mental health and remove a stigma about mental health. So I sure didn't come here to talk about mental health. I don't really know much about it, pay much attention to it, or anything, except to mention that it just does remind me that both walking in the mountains and standing under a really dark, natural, clear, brilliant, sparkling sky, I decided years ago were good for one component of health that I call spiritual health. So I didn't come here to talk about spiritual health either, but it's that connection to mental health today. So coincidentally, so I'm just mentioning that in passing. Anyway, I mentioned hiking trails. I mentioned it's not always a clear blue sky there. There's some cloud there you see, but so anyway, after I stopped going to New Mexico skies, I'd heard of this other place called the Cosmic Campground. Anybody heard of that? No, it's not really well known, but there was some noise made about it a few years ago, probably 5 years ago or more, when it was built and opened up. The actual noise about it was there was a little bit of excitement about it, and I gravitated to it because it was a time when I stopped going to this place called New Mexico Skies, and I was wondering where else could I go in this nice state that I basically fell in love with going to visit for its dark skies. I heard about this place called Cosmic Campground. The actual noise about it was there were a few reviews about it. This is a good 5 years ago or more. They weren't good reviews at all because somebody would say they went there and they stayed for a night or two, and yahoos and pickup trucks came along to discourage them from camping there. And yeah, that's easy to believe. I have no problem believing that. Anyway, here's a view from the highway when you turn in. So I think I showed you a map. I may have another map. Oh, here it is here. So point here is one way of going there is to El Paso Airport, closest airport. Another major airport is Phoenix, where I went last year. Yeah, the only real disadvantage of this particular hobby is huge carbon footprint. And if you don't mind that too much, just for stargazing and hiking, then I'll put up with that. But basically leave El Paso and get to this place called Silver City, which I may mention a bit more about. Drive up the road here to the Cosmic Campground. So I drove there. The first year I went there from El Paso, and I gravitated to Silver City because it has a campground, a KOA campground, which is open year-round. So it might have been January or February, and so fine for me for camping, do some camping. So I went there and drove from this place called Silver City up toward the Cosmic Campground. Another spot, I don't think Arnold mentioned it, this place called Truth or Consequences. He mentioned the White Sands Missile Range where a capsule made an unexpected landing. I don't think Arnold mentioned it, but there's another spot here, a huge, gigantic runway built onto the desert. Anybody know what that is? So it's called Virgin Galactic Spaceport, USA. So it's a gigantic runway on the desert. Anyway, let's get back on track here. So you drive into the Cosmic Campground. It's part of the National Forest. So you see a sign saying Gila National Forest Cosmic Campground. That's how you know you're at the Cosmic Campground. I've only gone there a few times on my own when a weekday or sort of thing. That if I go for a week, I go in the middle of the week, then there's nobody else there, and might be a bit different on the weekends. As far as I know, it's a gravitation point for public star parties of sorts, similar to the CAO might be, although it's far out of the way. It does seem to be used for that purpose for some public education events. But when I've gone there, it's quite deserted, and I just have a few pictures to give you some idea what's going on. So I set up there a little telescope I have there. You can see. I think I have another picture of it later, but telescope, and it's quite barren, and it's quite a wide open horizon mostly, and it's quite a lot of scrubland. So that's desert, and that's New Mexico. So fine, and you see again some blue sky there. And so they have these pads that they built for people to come in, unload their telescope gear, set them up on the pads, just like you'd see at CAO or some other spots, and that's basically the extent of the Cosmic Campground. So it's fine. It's a great place to go, and you can camp all you want and set up the telescopes. I guess that's how it's used. I'm not aware of any big use for it, but haven't really been there except for, as I mentioned, on my own in the middle of the week when it's, and especially in winter when I'm the only one there. So I think that's it. So a road comes back out to the highway and leaving Cosmic Campground. That's the picture. That's the point that I'm trying to make in this picture. So I think that's all I mentioned there. One reason I've been attracted to this place called Silver City is because I found it was a good place to hang around, camp first year. Then I found there were some good motels at a reasonable price there, so I started staying at motels. And I noticed I like to go to hiking trails, so hiking trails in all directions, and this is a Gila National Forest, and great spots for hiking in the mountains. And so on the way up to one spot, I drove past the spot on one day and thought, hey, that's a pretty neat looking lookout spot, well above the highway, and that's a really neat spot, and it's only an hour from Silver City. I thought it probably would be a nice nighttime observation spot. And so it turned out that it is. And so here's this place called Aldo Leopold Wilderness Lookout Area, and you may not have heard of Aldo Leopold. He was an educator and wilderness educator, earlier part of last century, so quite a while ago, and he either set up or had this facility named after him. But it's really a drive-in parking lot and some picnic shelters set up. That's basically what it is. So it's ideal at night. Go there in the evening and there's really nobody there, especially in January or February, which is when I've gone. Might be a bit busier in the weekends, I don't know. Might be a bit busier in springtime. Might be some venue for public stargazing events, I don't know, I haven't been there then. But the times I've gone, it's a big wide open area. You know, there's some trees and bushes around that block view of a perfect horizon. Otherwise, it's quite a good spot for setting up just in the parking lot. So that's what I've been doing. So I've been doing that for the past 5 years or more. Haven't really tried to keep count of how many years I've gone there. So I think I just have a couple of images of this spot to finish off, and a plaque is set up to just give some idea. And so it just says USDA Forest Service, Healy National Forest, and thanks Aldo Leopold for setting up this wilderness and providing this educational sort of facility. That's what it was. So I found it to be pretty good for stargazing. So that's really the last point that I'm mentioning about my travels in New Mexico. I've decided in the past few years, this is really the ideal, perfect spot that I found to go to. The only imperfection might be the financial cost and the carbon footprint of going there for a week. Rent airline flight, accommodation, and car rental. Costs over $1,000 if I go for about a week or so. But anyway, it's the most ideal spot I've settled on for going to see dark, starry, really unpolluted, spectacular night skies. So I think that's about most of the images I set up to show you. I titled this one Lines Across the Sky. So I didn't want to say anything negative here, but Arnold already did. So I think Arnold's words were, "Oh dear," about the Starlink. So I didn't want to say anything negative, but these are a snapshot of one screen of aircraft. What's the word? Aircraft positions, you could say. And so another map has, you look on any particular airline, if you've got lines coming across to the major airports, but you can pick out major airports here. You can pick out south end of Nevada here. Here's a city called Las Vegas and a city called Salt Lake City, and El Paso, Texas is down here. So the main point of this picture is southern New Mexico is right here. So you see the square marking off the state of New Mexico. So southern New Mexico is right here. So it's relatively unpolluted by these lines crossing the sky at night. There are some, I have seen some across the southern sky, so it could well be this particular flight path here, but you stand there at 3 in the morning and see some aircraft, so it's not totally natural or free from aircraft, but it is pretty darn nice, both at the Cosmic Campground approximately here and Aldo Leopold Wilderness Area approximately right here. They're relatively unpolluted by aircraft. Wouldn't say anything about Starlinks yet. So did I set up anything else to illustrate? I did. So this is my telescope I've been taking for the past few years. I bought this telescope approximately maybe 6, 7, maybe 8 years ago, specifically to take to New Mexico. So it's my favorite little portable scope, and this is a 5-inch or 125 or 127 millimeter Celestron C5 or SE, whatever they call it. Anybody have these? I've forgotten the name of their telescope offhand, but anyway, it's a nice little Celestron scope. I settled on that size because that little tube assembly would fit into a little backpack that could easily carry on an aircraft. little equatorial mount that you may have seen in another picture I have from a little manual German equatorial mount. Fits into carry-on baggage, or I should say stow-on baggage. It can weigh as much as it wants to, and it's not really a problem. You pack it up with some clothing and camping gear, and it fits really well. But this packs into a little backpack. So Celestron Nexstar is the word I was trying to think of. So some of you may have the Celestron Nexstar telescope. Quite a nice little telescope. The only slight disadvantage around here of a Schmidt Cassegrain is you need a pretty good dew cap or good dew heating, but dew has never been a problem in New Mexico. It's a very dry desert area. I never have had a problem, never needed a dew cap. Just have some extra brackets on here for a finder. You see this sort of junky looking hose clamp. It's just holding on a Telrad finder base that I use. Otherwise, it's sitting on a mount that anyway, a bunch of details there, but I thought I'd show you my little telescope since it was actually in the previous picture. So I settled on taking this telescope with me to New Mexico, and I just love to take that one. Actually, the first year I went, first couple of years, I took a little 80 millimeter refractor. I shouldn't call it little because it gave spectacularly astounding images of some things that I thought were difficult deep sky objects to see, and I saw them really easily through transparent skies. And if I didn't mention the altitude there, it's in the mountains, approximately 6,000 to 7,000 feet, or you can convert it to meters if you like, but it's fairly well up in the mountains, and it's fairly well up into dry sky. So an 80 millimeter refractor did a really good job. And so a couple of objects that Arnold pointed out were NGC 2244 and the Rosette Nebula. So I have looked at the Rosette Nebula whenever I've gone in the evening. More recent years I go in the morning. That is to say, I drive up in the early morning before sunrise, when the moon is around first quarter moon in the evening sky. And so the Rosette Nebula is one really nice little test object I've like looking at in the evening sky, because part of it is visible, and even without a filter, and the filter really enhances it. So it's always an interesting test in really dark, transparent skies to see how much of the Rosette Nebula I could see. And that little cluster in the middle that Arnold pointed out, NGC 2244, really glitters sparklingly bright. It's a really beautiful sight. Anyway, in recent years I've been taking this little telescope, which does a great job as well. And so Arnold mentioned the antenna galaxy, so I think that's a pretty good. I haven't looked for it yet, but I should look for it with this little telescope next time I go to look at it in the morning sky, because in the morning sky in February, the area around Corvus to Virgo is rising up toward the meridian. So that might be an interesting test object. So that's the telescope I've been using. One little detail I wanted to point out, I think I pointed out that it's not always, I told you it's not always nice, clear, deep blue sky, because it's occasionally cloudy and blizzard, possibly. Another little hassle that's occurred some years is forest fires. So this is an area that's been wrecked by forest fire. All quite natural, I think. Fine, forest fires occur naturally. It's a huge forested area. It's occasionally pretty darn dry, and so forest fires can wreck your plans and block off highways, and even if you're in the wrong area, contribute smoke into the sky. But that hasn't happened to me yet, because these occur mostly in springtime. I've gone mainly in the winter. So that's a slight little complication as well. So I think with that, I just put in a picture of leaving the forest. I'm always sorry to leave, but the purpose of the picture is I am leaving it, so I'm finished off with one quick summary, and all I could find to summarize was to say that I think it's a fantastic sight for me to see really clear, natural, transparent night skies. So thanks for your time.